Erase that. Caroline Whitaker's voice cut across the 7th grade classroom before Malik Thompson had finished writing the final symbol on the whiteboard. The black marker stopped in his hand. 23 students stared at the strange chain of numbers he had drawn beneath the problem she had assigned 5 minutes earlier. Caroline stood near her desk with one arm folded across her navy cardigan, her expression fixed somewhere between impatience and disbelief. "You are confusing everyone," she said. Malik looked at the equation, then back at her. He was 12 years old, small for his age, with closely cropped hair and a faded gray sweatshirt that had been washed enough times to lose its softness. "But it works for every case," he said. A few students shifted in their chairs. Someone near the windows whispered his name. Caroline stepped toward the board. "The class is learning the method in the textbook. You cannot invent steps whenever you feel like it." Malik lowered the marker, but did not move away. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, a yellow school bus rolled slowly past the front entrance of Jefferson Ridge Middle School, its brakes giving a faint sigh through the closed windows. "I am not inventing steps," Malik said. "I am removing the ones we do not need." Caroline's jaw tightened. She pointed to the example she had written at the top of the board. "Then explain why your answer matches mine." Malik glanced at the numbers. "Because your answer is right." For half a second, Caroline looked almost satisfied. Then he added, "Your rule is what fails." The room went still. Even Ethan Miller, who usually spent math class tapping his pencil against his sneaker, stopped moving. Caroline stared at Malik as though she had misheard him. "Excuse me." Malik swallowed. He could feel the marker drying against his fingertips. "The answer works because this part repeats." He circled a pair of terms. "You are making us calculate the same relationship again, only with different numbers." Caroline walked closer. "That is not how this lesson is taught." "I know." "Then sit down." Malik looked toward his desk in the back row. His black composition notebook was lying open beside a chipped mechanical pencil, its pages crowded with boxes, arrows, and the small bridge-shaped symbol he had been drawing for months. He should have returned to his seat. He knew that. His mother had told him more than once that being right did not mean adults would enjoy hearing it. But something about the problem bothered him too much to leave unfinished. "Give me another number," he said. Caroline's eyebrows rose. "What?" "One you never showed us." A nervous laugh came from somewhere near the middle row. Caroline ignored it. Malik continued, quieter now. "If I am guessing, it will fail." Caroline looked at the board, then at the students watching her. The challenge had changed the air in the room. She picked up a red marker, wrote a new value beneath the original problem, and underlined it twice. "Fine," she said. "Use that." Malik studied the number for less than 10 seconds. He wrote 3 short lines, drew the bridge-shaped mark between 2 terms, and placed the marker on the tray. Caroline stepped forward and checked the answer. Once, then again. The red marker remained frozen in her hand. Malik's answer was correct. No one spoke. Malik looked at her and said, "Give me one harder." Caroline did not give him another number right away. She stood beneath the whiteboard with the red marker still uncapped in her hand, looking for Malik's answer to the 23 students waiting for her reaction. The room smelled faintly of dry erase ink, pencil shavings, and the lemon cleaner the custodians used before first period. Malik remained beside the board, shoulders slightly tense, but his face was calm. He was not smiling. He was not trying to embarrass her. That almost made the moment harder to dismiss. "Return to your seat," Caroline said. Malik hesitated, then placed the black marker on the tray and walked toward the back row. His sneakers made almost no sound against the tile. As he sat down, Ethan Miller leaned slightly across the aisle and whispered, "How did you do that?" Malik looked at the board. "It repeats." Ethan frowned. "What repeats?" Malik opened his black composition notebook, but did not answer. The cover had been repaired with clear tape along the spine, and several corners had curled from being carried in the same backpack for more than a year. Inside were pages filled with number grids, arrows, boxes, crossed-out attempts, and the same small bridge-shaped mark that had appeared on the board. To everyone else, it looked messy. To Malik, it was organized. Every mark meant something. That morning had started 4 hours earlier in a second-floor apartment in Baltimore County, where the pipes clicked when the heat came on and the kitchen light flickered twice before staying bright. Malik had been eating toast at the small table while his mother, Denise Thompson, stood near the sink in pale blue hospital scrubs, finishing a cup of coffee before going to bed after her night shift. You have your math quiz today? She had asked. Not a quiz. A lesson. That sounds like something a teacher says before giving a quiz. Malik had smiled without looking up from his notebook. Denise noticed the pages. You were working on that again? I think I fixed one part. She leaned over his shoulder. The symbols meant nothing to her, but she had learned not to call them scribbles. Did you finish the homework first? Malik paused. Denise raised one eyebrow. Malik, mostly is not finished. He closed the notebook. The homework makes me write the same thing 5 times. Then write it 5 times. But I already know what happens. Denise pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. Fatigue showed beneath her eyes, but her voice stayed gentle. School is not only about knowing something. Sometimes it is about showing people how you know it. Malik looked toward the dark window above the sink. What if they do not like how I know it? Denise was quiet for a moment. Then you stay respectful. You explain yourself clearly. And you do not make yourself smaller just because somebody is uncomfortable with the way your mind works. The school bus had arrived 12 minutes later. Malik carried those words with him through the cold morning, through homeroom, through science, and finally into Caroline Whitaker's math class. Now, sitting in the back row with the notebook open under his hands, he looked toward the board where his correct answer still remained. Caroline had erased everything around it except the number she had chosen. She turned to the class and began explaining the textbook method again, faster this time. Malik listened. He always listened. That was the part adults kept getting wrong. He was not refusing to learn their way. He simply could not stop seeing another one. Caroline Whitaker continued the lesson as if the answer still written on the board had not unsettled her. She moved through each step with the practiced certainty of someone who had taught the same unit for years, underlining operations in red and circling the method printed in the district guide. Her classroom reflected that same order. Desks sat in straight rows. Homework bins were labeled by period. A laminated achievement chart near the door displayed test averages in colored bars, and Caroline updated it every Friday before students arrived. She believed structure gave children a fair chance. She believed rules made expectations clear. Most of all, she believed students learned best when they followed a process that could be measured. Malik had never fit comfortably inside that system. His test answers were often correct, but his work looked incomplete. He skipped steps, rearranged equations, and sometimes stared at a problem for several minutes before writing anything at all. In September, Caroline had marked one of his quizzes with the words "Show your reasoning." In October, she wrote "Follow the method taught in class." By November, his student record included a note saying he was difficult to redirect during mathematical instruction. Caroline had not written the first version of that sentence, but she had read it enough times that it began to shape what she expected from him. When Malik asked unusual questions, she heard resistance. When he found shortcuts, she saw avoidance. When he became quiet after being corrected, she interpreted the silence as attitude. Now, standing beneath the fluorescent lights, Caroline finished another example and turned toward the class. This method matters because it works consistently, she said. Malik looked down at his notebook. He could see the bridge-shaped mark connecting 2 terms again. The same relationship. The same unnecessary repetition. He pressed his pencil against the paper and tried not to raise his hand. Ethan glanced sideways at him. You see it again, do you not? He whispered. Malik nodded once. Caroline heard the whisper. Is there something you would like to share, Malik? 23 faces turned toward the back row. Malik felt heat rise along his neck. No, ma'am. Caroline held his gaze. Good. Then follow along. She turned back to the board. Malik tried. He copied the first line exactly as she wrote it. Then the second. By the third line, his hand stopped. The equation had folded into the same pattern he had been drawing for months. He wrote the bridge symbol in the margin without thinking. Caroline walked between the rows checking notebooks. When she reached Malik's desk, she saw it immediately. What is that? She asked. Malik placed his palm over part of the page. Just how I remember it. We are not using personal symbols. It helps me see what repeats. Caroline exhaled through her nose. Malik, the assignment is not asking what you see. It is asking whether you can follow instructions. He looked up at her. What if the instructions take longer than they need to? A few students became very still. Caroline straightened. Then you follow them anyway until you understand why they are there. Malik looked toward the whiteboard. I do understand why they are there. Caroline's expression hardened. Clearly, you do not. The bell had not rung. The lesson was not finished. But something had shifted again, and this time the entire class could feel it. Caroline kept her eyes on Malik for several seconds, then turned toward the whiteboard without another word. The red marker clicked softly as she removed the cap. "All right," she said. "If you understand the pattern as well as you think you do, then show us." A few students shifted in their seats. Malik sat very still. He had not expected her to continue. Caroline erased the last example and wrote a new set of numbers across the board, larger this time, with an extra condition beneath them. "This one is not in your homework," she said. "It is not in the textbook section we are using today either." She stepped aside and looked directly at him. "Solve it." Ethan turned toward Malik, his eyebrows raised. Malik looked at the board. The numbers were different, but the shape was familiar. Not the physical shape on the page. The relationship underneath it. He could almost feel the repeated structure before he wrote anything down. "Can I use my method?" he asked. Caroline folded her arms. "Use whatever you believe works." Malik stood and walked toward the front of the room. The marker felt warm from Caroline's hand when she passed it to him. He read the problem once, then again. The classroom seemed quieter than before. The ventilation system hummed above the ceiling tiles. Somewhere in the hallway, a locker door closed with a hollow metal sound. Malik wrote the first line, then the second. He stopped before the third and drew the small bridge-shaped mark between two terms. Caroline's expression tightened. "That symbol again." Malik nodded. "It is the same relationship." "Prove it." He wrote 2 more lines and stepped away from the board. Caroline moved closer. She checked the answer with the calculator on her desk. "Correct." She entered the numbers again. "Correct." Ethan let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Caroline placed the calculator down. "You could have worked backward from the answer." Malik looked confused. "You gave me the numbers. That does not mean you understand the process." Malik glanced at the board, then changed one. Caroline picked up the red marker again. She changed a value near the center of the problem and added another restriction. "There." Malik did not return to his seat. He studied the new version for about 12 seconds, then erased only one line of his previous work. He rewrote 2 terms, moved the bridge symbol, and placed a new answer beneath the first. Caroline checked it. Correct again. This time nobody whispered. The silence was too complete for that. Malik looked toward her. "It still repeats." Caroline stared at the board. The red marker remained between her fingers, but she did not write. Malik continued, careful not to sound proud. "If you keep changing the numbers, the relationship stays the same." Caroline turned to him. "You are making a claim about every possible case." "Yes, ma'am." "That is a very large claim for someone who has not shown the required steps." Malik looked at the textbook open on her desk, then back at his own work. "The required steps are making the same thing happen more than once." Caroline's face hardened. "That is enough." Malik did not move. "You asked me to prove it, and I am telling you to sit down." He looked at the board one more time. "Give me one harder." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "You think this is a game?" Malik shook his head. "No, ma'am." "Then why are you challenging everything I teach?" The question landed differently from the others. Malik's grip tightened around the marker. "I am not challenging you." He looked at the bridge-shaped mark between the numbers. "I am trying to show you what I keep seeing." Caroline stared at Malik for a long moment, the red marker still in her hand. Around them, the classroom had gone so quiet that the soft ticking of the wall clock sounded louder than it should have. Malik remained beside the board, one hand lowered at his side, the other still holding the black marker. He had not raised his voice. He had not laughed. He had not looked at the other students for approval. He was simply waiting for her to answer. "You are missing the point," Caroline said. Malik glanced at the equation. "I thought the point was to solve it." A few students shifted in their seats. Caroline's expression tightened. "The point is to learn the method you are being taught." "I did learn it." "Then use it." "But if there is a shorter way that still works, why would I pretend I do not see it?" The words were respectful, but Caroline heard defiance in them. She had spent years trying to keep classrooms orderly, measurable, predictable. She knew how quickly one student challenging a lesson could turn into 10 students deciding rules were optional. She looked at the whiteboard, at the bridge-shaped mark, at the correct answer that had resisted every attempt to disprove it. Then she looked at Malik. "You think being correct once means you understand more than everyone else?" "No, ma'am." "You think being different makes you advanced?" "No, ma'am." "Then stop acting as if the rules do not apply to you." Malik's shoulders stiffened. I am not saying they do not apply to me. You refuse to show your work the way you are instructed. You interrupt the lesson. You challenge every correction. And when I explain what is expected, you insist your way is better. Malik looked toward his desk. His black composition notebook sat open in the back row, the taped spine catching the fluorescent light. I only asked you to test it. Caroline set the red marker down harder than necessary. I have tested enough. Ethan lowered his eyes. No one moved. Caroline continued, her voice controlled but sharper now. You are not listening, Malik. He looked back at her. I am listening. No. You are waiting for your turn to prove everyone else wrong. That hurt more than he expected. Malik swallowed. That is not what I am doing. Then what are you doing? He looked at the board. Trying to show you something. Caroline exhaled. I cannot teach a student who refuses to be taught. The sentence hung between them. Malik's fingers tightened around the marker. Caroline took one step closer. Do you understand me? You are making yourself unteachable. A chair creaked near the windows. Someone stopped tapping a pencil. Malik felt the words settle over the room before he fully understood how much it would stay with him. Unteachable. Not confused. Not behind. Not difficult. Unteachable. He looked at Caroline and said quietly, because I solved it differently? Because you refuse instruction. But the answer is right. Caroline pointed toward the classroom door. Take your notebook and go to the office. Malik did not move at first. For what? For disrupting class. I did what you asked. Malik. Her voice dropped. Go. He walked back to his desk. No one looked at him directly now. He closed the black notebook, slid the pencil inside, and tucked it beneath his arm. Ethan whispered, You were right. Malik paused for half a second but did not answer. He walked toward the door, the soles of his sneakers brushing softly against the tile. Before stepping into the hallway, he turned back toward the board. His bridge-shaped symbol was still there between the numbers. Caroline followed his eyes and reached for the eraser. Malik watched her wipe it away. Then he stepped into the hallway alone. The hallway outside Caroline Whitaker's classroom felt colder than the room he had just left. Malik stood for a moment with the black composition notebook pressed against his chest, listening to the muffled sound of Caroline continuing the lesson behind the closed door. His name was not mentioned again. That somehow made the word she had used feel heavier. Unteachable. He walked toward the main office beneath rows of student artwork and college banners, passing a glass trophy case that reflected his gray sweatshirt and the taped spine of his notebook. At the office, the secretary asked him to sit in a plastic chair near the wall while she called Principal Rebecca Hayes. Malik placed the notebook on his knees. The clock above the attendance window read 10:17. He watched the red second hand move. 10 minutes passed, then 20. By 10:42, the chair had begun to feel hard against his back. He opened the notebook. The page from that morning was still unfinished. Malik drew the bridge-shaped mark again, then copied the problem Caroline had placed on the board from memory. He changed one number, then another. The pattern remained. His pencil moved faster. Boxes became arrows. Arrows became pairs. He tested a case with 6 terms, then 8, then 12. At 10:51, a shadow crossed the page. What is that symbol? A man asked. Malik looked up. The man was in his early 50s, black, wearing a brown sport coat over a light blue shirt. A visitor badge clipped to his pocket read Dr. Nathaniel Brooks, Johns Hopkins University Outreach Program. He carried a canvas messenger bag and a stack of folders. Malik looked back at the notebook. It is just something I use. Brooks leaned slightly closer, but did not touch the page. For what? To show which parts are doing the same job. Brooks studied the numbers. Where did you learn to do that? Malik hesitated. He had heard that question before from adults who usually meant who taught you to write it wrong. Nobody, he said. Brooks pulled an empty chair away from the wall and sat several feet from him. Then where did it come from? Malik turned back 3 pages. I kept seeing it. Brooks followed the bridge-shaped marks across the paper. How long? I do not know. Malik flipped farther back. The symbols became rougher, the handwriting smaller. Maybe since 4th grade. Brooks stopped moving. You have been developing this for 3 years? Malik shrugged. I was trying to make homework shorter. For the first time that morning, an adult laughed without making Malik feel like the joke. Brooks pointed toward one line. Why does this pair disappear? Malik's face changed. The embarrassment left it. It does not disappear. It becomes part of the next relationship. He shifted the notebook so Brooks could see better. If these two values change together, you do not need to calculate both paths. You can carry the difference forward. Brooks stared at the page. Show me. Malik did. He started slowly, expecting to be interrupted. Brooks did not interrupt. He asked another question, then another. Each time, Malik answered with more confidence. At 11:04, Brooks opened one of his folders, pulled out a blank sheet of paper, and wrote a problem Malik had never seen. Try this one. Malik studied it. The numbers were larger. The structure was not identical. For nearly a minute, neither of them spoke. Then Malik drew the bridge. Brooks leaned back in his chair. Where is your teacher? He asked. Malik looked toward the hallway leading back to Caroline's classroom. She sent me here. Brooks's eyes moved from Malik to the notebook. Why? Malik closed the cover halfway. She said I was unteachable. Brooks looked at him for a long second, then gently pushed the notebook open again. I think somebody should finish listening before they decide that. Dr. Nathaniel Brooks did not close the notebook. He turned one page, then another, moving slowly enough that Malik could see he was actually reading the work instead of searching for a reason to dismiss it. The office around them continued as if nothing unusual was happening. Phones rang behind the attendance window. A copier started somewhere down the hall. A student came in for a late pass and left again. But at the small row of plastic chairs, Malik felt the morning changing. This mark, Brooks said, pointing to the bridge-shaped symbol. You use it whenever two expressions share the same structure? Malik nodded. Not always the same numbers. The same job. Brooks looked at him. Explain that. Malik shifted forward in his chair. Sometimes two parts look different because they are written differently, but when you follow what they do, they cancel or combine the same way. Brooks studied the page. And you noticed this in 4th grade? Not like this. Malik flipped back toward the beginning of the notebook. At first I just circled things. Then I started drawing lines. The bridge came later because the lines got messy. Brooks smiled faintly. So you invented notation because your first notation was inefficient. Malik shrugged. I guess. Before Brooks could ask another question, the office door opened and Principal Rebecca Hayes stepped out. She was a white woman in her early 50s with silver-framed glasses and the careful expression of someone accustomed to hearing two sides before making decisions. Malik Thompson, she said. Malik stood. Yes, ma'am. Her eyes moved to Brooks. Dr. Brooks, I did not realize you were waiting here. I was not, he said. I found something more interesting. Principal Hayes looked at Malik's notebook. I need to speak with Malik about what happened in class. Malik closed the cover halfway. Brooks stood. Then I would like to listen, if that is appropriate. A few minutes later, they sat in the principal's office. Malik took the chair closest to the door. Brooks sat beside him while Principal Hayes opened a discipline form on her computer. Your teacher says you repeatedly challenged instruction and refused to follow the assigned method. Malik looked at his hands. I followed it. She says you continued arguing after being told to stop. I asked her to test my answer. Principal Hayes paused. Were you disrespectful? Malik thought about the class staring at him, about Caroline's voice when she called him unteachable. I do not think so. That is not exactly an answer. Malik lifted his eyes. I said yes, ma'am. I did not yell. I did not call her anything. Brooks remained silent. Principal Hayes leaned back. Then what were you trying to do? Malik placed the notebook on her desk. Finish explaining. She looked at the taped cover. Explaining what? Malik opened to the page from that morning. This. Principal Hayes stared at the numbers, clearly unsure what she was seeing. Brooks finally spoke. I think he should show us. Malik looked at him. Brooks nodded. Start where you started with me. Malik turned the notebook toward Principal Hayes and began. His voice was quiet at first. He explained how he grouped repeated relationships, why he carried a difference instead of recalculating both sides, and where the bridge symbol came from. Principal Hayes asked one question. Brooks asked another. Neither interrupted him. By the time Malik reached the last line, the office felt different. Principal Hayes looked from the notebook to Brooks. Is this correct? She asked. Brooks did not answer immediately. The examples I have checked are. Malik washed her face. For the first time all morning, an adult with authority was not asking why he had failed to follow instructions. She was asking whether his idea worked. Principal Hayes closed the discipline form without saving it. Then she reached for the phone on her desk. I am calling Mrs. Whitaker. Malik's stomach tightened. Brooks noticed. It is all right, he said. Malik looked at the notebook. She is going to say I was arguing. Brooks folded his hands. Then we will listen to her too. He paused. But this time, she is going to listen to you. Caroline Whitaker arrived at the principal's office less than 5 minutes later, still carrying the red marker she had used in class. She stopped when she saw Dr. Brooks sitting beside Malik and the black composition notebook open on Principal Hayes' desk. What is going on? She asked. Principal Hayes gestured toward the empty chair. We are reviewing what happened in class. Caroline sat, but her posture remained rigid. I already explained what happened. Malik refused to follow instruction and continued challenging the lesson after I told him to stop. Malik looked down at the notebook. Dr. Brooks spoke carefully. He also showed me the method he was trying to explain. Caroline glanced at him. Dr. Brooks, with respect, this is a 7th grade classroom. Students are expected to learn foundational methods before inventing shortcuts. I agree that foundations matter, Brooks said. But I am not sure this is a shortcut. Caroline's expression sharpened. He skipped steps. Malik looked up. Because they repeat. Malik, Principal Hayes said gently. Let Mrs. Whitaker finish. He closed his mouth. Caroline continued. This is exactly the problem. Every correction becomes a debate. He believes being clever means he does not have to follow the same expectations as everyone else. Brooks turned one page of the notebook. Have you looked through this? Caroline barely glanced at it. I have seen enough of those symbols. Have you looked through it? Brooks repeated. The room went quiet. Caroline folded her hands. No, before Brooks could respond, the office door opened again. A district administrator named Thomas Reed stepped inside, carrying a tablet and wearing the expression of someone already late for another meeting. Principal Hayes stood. Thomas, I did not know you were coming down. I was in the building for the curriculum review. His eyes moved around the room. What is this about? Caroline answered first. A classroom behavior issue that has become unnecessarily complicated. Malik's fingers tightened around the edge of his notebook. Brooks looked at Reed. Actually, I think the student may have developed a mathematical method worth examining. Reed blinked. Then he gave a small, uncertain smile. He is 12. Yes, Brooks said. I noticed. Reed looked at the pages without sitting down. Is this part of the approved curriculum? No. Has it been independently verified? Not yet. Reed exhaled. Then we should be careful about turning classroom scribbles into something they are not. Malik felt the word land harder than he expected. Scribbles. Brooks's face changed. I did not call them that. Reed held up one hand. I am not dismissing the student. I am saying we have procedures. His mother is already on the way, correct? Principal Hayes nodded. Then let us handle the discipline concern. Let the family take him home if necessary, and we can revisit the academic question later. Malik looked at Brooks. Later when? Reed had already turned toward Principal Hayes. After we have context. I gave context, Malik said. Everyone looked at him. Reed's voice stayed polite. Malik, adults are speaking. The room seemed to shrink. Malik lowered his eyes. Caroline looked uncomfortable for the first time, but she said nothing. Brooks leaned forward. He has been trying to explain this all morning. Reed glanced at his watch. And I am sure someone will listen when there is time to evaluate it properly. Malik slowly closed the notebook. The taped spine made a soft crackle under his hand. Principal Hayes looked from him to Brooks, then to Reed. Perhaps we should at least copy the pages. Reed shook his head. Not until his parent gives permission. Let us not make this bigger than it needs to be. Malik stood when the secretary appeared at the door and said his mother had arrived. He tucked the notebook beneath his arm. For the second time that morning, adults had reached a decision before he had finished. Only this time, one of them knew there might be something important on those pages. Brooks watched Malik walk toward the door. Malik, he said. Malik turned. Brooks held his gaze. Do not erase anything. Denise Thompson entered the principal's office, still wearing pale blue hospital scrubs beneath a dark winter coat, her identification badge turned backward against her chest. She had driven straight from the hospital after finishing a night shift and sleeping less than 3 hours. Malik saw the fatigue in her eyes before he saw the worry. What happened? She asked. Principal Hayes stood. Mrs. Thompson, thank you for coming. There was a disagreement in math class this morning. Denise looked at Malik. A disagreement? Thomas Reed answered before Malik could. Your son refused to follow the assigned method, continued challenging instruction, and was sent to the office. Denise's face did not change. Did he disrespect anyone? Reed paused. That is part of what we are discussing. Denise turned toward Caroline. Did he call you a name? No. Did he threaten anyone? No. Did he refuse to do the work? Caroline hesitated. He refused to do it the required way. Denise looked at Malik. And your answer? It was right. Dr. Brooks spoke from beside the desk. More than once. Denise finally noticed the black composition notebook open near him. Who are you? Nathaniel Brooks. I teach mathematics at Johns Hopkins University. I am here today for the school outreach program. He held up one page without removing it from the notebook. Your son showed me something I think deserves a closer look. Reed exhaled quietly. Dr. Brooks, we already agreed not to expand this until we have proper context. Denise looked at him. You agreed. I did not. The room went silent. She pulled out the chair beside Malik and sat down. What does he want to show you? Brooks turned toward Malik. That is the question. Malik opened the notebook again. His mother placed one hand near his elbow, not touching him, just close enough that he noticed. Brooks looked toward Principal Hayes. I would like to propose a simple test. No internet. No textbook. No notebook once the problem is given. We read a problem Malik has never seen before. Something outside today's lesson. Caroline folded her arms. And if he cannot solve it? Brooks looked at her. Then we learn something. And if he can? Then we learn something more important. Reed shook his head. We cannot turn a disciplinary meeting into an academic experiment. Denise's voice stayed calm. You called me away from home because my son supposedly refused to learn. If someone here can determine whether he actually understands the material, I want that determined before anybody puts another label in his record. Principal Hayes looked at Reed. She has a point. Caroline glanced toward Malik. One correct answer does not prove a method. Malik said quietly. Then give me one I have never seen. Denise looked at him, then at Brooks. Can you do that? Brooks smiled without warmth. I already have one in mind. 10 minutes later, they moved to a small conference room beside the office. Brooks wrote the problem on a clean whiteboard while Malik waited outside with his mother. Caroline reviewed it first. Her expression changed slightly. This is beyond the 7th grade curriculum. That is intentional, Brooks said. Reed checked the time. How long? 15 minutes. When Malik entered, his notebook stayed with Denise. The room contained only a table, 4 chairs, the whiteboard, a clock, and one black marker. Brooks pointed toward the problem. You have never seen this exact question before. Malik studied it. No, sir. You may ask what the symbols mean, but nothing about how to solve it. Malik nodded. The clock began at 11:38. For the first 2 minutes, he did not write anything. Caroline watched him from the far wall. Reed checked his tablet. Denise kept both hands folded in her lap. At 11:41, Malik finally lifted the marker. He wrote one expression, stopped, erased half of it, then drew the bridge-shaped symbol. Brooks leaned forward. Caroline's eyes narrowed. At 11:44, Malik added a second line. At 11:45, he stepped back from the board and stared at what he had written. Then, with more than 7 minutes still remaining, he capped the marker. I am done, he said. For several seconds, nobody moved. The black marker rested in Malik's hand while the wall clock continued ticking toward 11:46. Dr. Brooks stood and walked to the whiteboard. He did not congratulate Malik. He did not smile. He read the work from top to bottom, then reached for a calculator. Caroline watched him enter the values. Thomas Reed lowered his tablet. Denise remained perfectly still. Brooks checked the result once, then again using a different arrangement of the numbers. He set the calculator on the table. The answer is correct. Denise released a breath she had been holding. Caroline looked at the board. That proves he can solve this example. Brooks turned toward Malik. Exactly. Malik looked confused. Brooks continued. The answer is not the important part. He pointed to the bridge-shaped symbol between two expressions. This is... Caroline stepped closer. You said you wanted to test whether his method worked. I wanted to test whether he understood it. Brooks faced Malik. Do not tell me the steps. Tell me why this symbol belongs here. Malik looked at the board for several seconds. Because those two parts are not separate. They look separate. On the page, yes. Then what makes them connected? Malik uncapped the marker again. He drew 2 small boxes beneath the problem and placed matching terms inside them. If this value changes, that one changes with it. The textbook method calculates both sides and compares them later. I compare the relationship first. Brooks nodded slowly. And when does that fail? Malik did not answer immediately. He erased one box and changed a term. If the relationship stops being preserved, how would you know? Malik drew another bridge, then crossed it out. Because this difference would not stay constant. The room became silent again. Brooks took a blank sheet from the table and wrote 3 new expressions. These are not the same problem. Malik studied them. No, sir. Can your idea handle all 3? Malik looked at the first, then the second. He hesitated at the third. Caroline noticed. There, she said softly. That one is different. Malik nodded. It is. Reed leaned forward. So the method fails? Malik shook his head. No, the bridge has to move. He returned to the board and rewrote only part of the third expression. Then he placed the symbol in a different position. Brooks checked it. His expression changed. Why did you move it? Because I was matching the wrong relationship before. You corrected the method, not the answer. Yes, sir. Brooks stepped back. For the first time, there was something close to astonishment in his face. Caroline saw it. What are you seeing? She asked. Brooks looked at the board, then at Malik's notebook still resting beside Denise. He is not memorizing a shortcut. He pointed to the bridge symbol. He is describing a transformation. Reed frowned. In plain English? Brooks kept his eyes on Malik's work. He has found a way to represent when different-looking calculations behave the same way underneath. Caroline looked from the board to Malik. But he is 12. Brooks turned toward her. Mathematics does not check birthdays before something is true. The sentence settled over the room. Malik stood beside the whiteboard, suddenly aware that everyone was looking at him differently. He did not feel like a genius. He felt like the same boy who had eaten toast in a small kitchen that morning and tried to finish his homework faster. Brooks picked up the black composition notebook and opened to an older page. Malik, have you ever tested this beyond the kinds of problems you get in school? Malik nodded cautiously. Sometimes. How far? Malik walked over and flipped toward the back. Several pages were filled with denser patterns, smaller handwriting, and bridge symbols connecting expressions Caroline did not recognize. Brooks stopped at one page. His fingers rested against the paper without turning it. You did this yourself? Yes, sir. Brooks stared at the page for a long time. Then he looked at Principal Hayes. We are no longer talking about whether he understood today's lesson. Caroline's face lost its color. Brooks looked back at Malik. We need to find out how far this goes. Caroline Whitaker remained standing near the whiteboard after Dr. Brooks finished speaking. The room felt smaller now, not because anyone had moved closer, but because every explanation she had relied on that morning seemed to be narrowing around her. Malik's bridge-shaped symbol remained between the expressions, simple enough to look almost childish, yet stubborn enough to survive every problem Brooks had placed in front of it. Caroline folded her arms. If this is really a general method, she said, then it should work when the structure is less obvious. Brooks nodded. Agreed. He picked up the marker and held it out to her. Choose the test. Caroline looked at him. Any test. Any counterexample you believe should break his idea. She took the marker. Malik stepped away from the board and sat beside Denise. His mother placed both hands around a paper cup of water the secretary had brought her, but she never took a drink. Caroline wrote a new problem, one built from a variation she had used years earlier with advanced students. She added an extra term, changed the order, and removed the clean symmetry that had appeared in Malik's earlier examples. This one, she said. Brooks looked at Malik. No notebook. Malik nodded. He studied the board. 30 seconds passed. Then another. Caroline watched his face closely, waiting for hesitation to become confusion. Instead, Malik stood, walked forward, and drew the bridge in a place she had not expected. He worked through the expression and reached the correct result. Caroline checked it herself. Again, she said. The second problem was harder. She used a case with an uneven distribution and a condition designed to force the standard method into several separate steps. Malik stared at it long enough that Reed glanced at the wall clock. Then Malik erased one of Caroline's groupings, reorganized the terms, and used the same underlying relationship. Correct again. Caroline's fingers tightened around the calculator. Brooks did not celebrate. He simply said, one more. Caroline looked at him. Why? Because you still think the next one will save your conclusion. The words were not cruel, but they landed cleanly. Caroline turned back to the board. This time she built the most difficult example she could justify from material she understood well enough to defend. She checked it twice before handing the marker to Malik. He worked slowly. At one point, he stopped and shook his head. Caroline felt a small pulse of relief. It fails, she asked. Malik looked at the board. No, I placed the relationship wrong. He erased the bridge, moved it, and started again. 3 minutes later, he stepped away. Brooks checked the result. Denise watched his face. Principal Hayes watched Caroline. Brooks placed the calculator on the table. Correct. The silence that followed was different from every silence before it. Caroline looked at Malik, then at the board, then at the black composition notebook resting near Denise. For the first time, she seemed to see the pages as work instead of refusal. Malik stood quietly, waiting for another objection. Caroline opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She looked toward Principal Hayes. I thought he was avoiding the method because he did not understand it. Hayes said nothing. Caroline continued, more quietly. I thought every time he questioned a step, he was challenging my authority. Malik lowered his eyes. Caroline looked at him. You were trying to explain the same thing all morning. Malik nodded once. Her face tightened with something that looked less like embarrassment and more like recognition. And I kept stopping you. No one rescued her from the sentence. Reed looked down at his tablet. Brooks folded his arms. Denise remained still. Caroline took a breath. Malik, I was wrong. He looked up. She did not add a qualification. She did not say there had been confusion. She did not mention classroom management or procedure. I was wrong about what you understood, she said. And I was wrong to decide what your questions meant before I listened to your answers. Malik stared at her for a moment. Then he looked toward the bridge symbol on the board. Caroline followed his eyes. Show me again, she said. This time, she was not asking him to prove himself. She was asking because she finally wanted to learn. 3 weeks later, Malik sat at the end of a polished conference table inside a mathematics building at Johns Hopkins University, his black composition notebook resting beneath both hands. The taped spine had begun to loosen again. Across from him sat Dr. Brooks and 4 faculty members who had spent the previous 19 days testing the bridge method against problems Malik had never seen. Denise sat beside her son in the same dark winter coat she had worn to Jefferson Ridge Middle School, though this time she had slept before coming. Caroline Whitaker sat farther down the table, quieter than anyone remembered her being in class. On the wall behind them, a projection showed pages of equations translated from Malik's notebook into formal mathematical notation. One professor adjusted her glasses and looked toward Malik. We have not found a contradiction in the class of problems we tested. Malik looked at Brooks. Does that mean it works? Brooks smiled. It means your idea deserves to be taken seriously. Another professor leaned forward. More importantly, the way you represent repeated relationships may be useful beyond the examples you started with. Malik glanced at the bridge symbol projected 6 feet tall against the wall. It looked strange outside his notebook, almost too important for something he had invented because homework felt repetitive. Caroline watched him stare at it. You really did start this in 4th grade? She asked. Malik nodded. Mostly because I hated writing the same thing over and over. A few people laughed softly. This time, nobody was laughing at him. 2 days later, Jefferson Ridge received the university's written recommendation for continued study. By lunchtime, the district communications office had already drafted a press release. Thomas Reed called Denise and spoke excitedly about local television, gifted program placement, and a possible district campaign celebrating student innovation. Then he added something quieter. We are also reviewing Mrs. Whitaker's conduct. Denise put the call on speaker so Malik could hear. What does reviewing mean? Malik asked. Reed paused. There may be disciplinary consequences. Are you firing her? That decision has not been made. Malik looked across the kitchen table at his notebook. His mother stayed silent. Do not do that because of me, he said. Reed sounded surprised. Malik, what happened in that classroom was serious. I know. She called you unteachable and removed you from class. I know that too. Then why would you defend her? Malik looked toward the refrigerator, where Denise had taped one photocopy of the university letter beside a grocery list. I am not defending what she did. He paused. I just do not think firing one teacher fixes why nobody listened. Denise's eyes lifted toward him. Reed did not answer immediately. Malik continued. Mrs. Whitaker thought there was only one right way to show understanding. Principal Hayes almost wrote me up before anybody checked. You called my notebook scribbles before you read it. Silence came through the phone. If she leaves and everything else stays the same, another kid is going to sit in another class and hear the same thing. The following Monday, The district meeting changed direction. Instead of announcing punishment, Principal Hayes proposed a pilot program for students whose reasoning did not match standard classroom methods. Teachers would be trained to separate refusal from alternative problem solving, and students could request a second academic review before unconventional work was treated as misconduct. Caroline volunteered before anyone asked her. "I should be part of it," she said. Malik looked at her from across the table. Caroline met his eyes. "Not because I know how to teach it yet." She took a breath. "Because I know what it costs when a teacher stops being curious." Dr. Brooks closed the folder in front of him. The district had wanted a genius story. Malik had given them something harder. A reason to change. 4 months later, sunlight fell across the windows of Caroline Whitaker's classroom in long pale rectangles, catching the dust above the whiteboard and turning it almost gold. The desks were no longer arranged in perfectly straight rows. During the district pilot program, Caroline had moved them into small groups so students could compare different ways of thinking before anyone decided which method belonged on the board. The achievement chart near the door was gone. In its place hung a single sheet of paper with 3 questions printed in large black letters. "What do you notice? What do you think? Can you show another way?" Malik sat near the back beside Dr. Brooks, his black composition notebook open on the desk between them. The clear tape along the spine had been replaced twice, but the bridge-shaped symbol still covered page after page. The university team had continued studying the method, testing where it worked, where it did not, and how it might connect to existing mathematical ideas. Malik understood only part of the formal language they used. He did not mind. For once, adults were asking questions before giving him answers about his own mind. At the front of the room, a 6th-grade girl named Kayla stood beside the whiteboard holding a marker with both hands. Her solution did not match the worksheet. Caroline had noticed that immediately. Months earlier, she might have interrupted before Kayla reached the second line. Now she waited. "I know it looks wrong," Kayla said. "I just thought if I moved this part first, everything else got easier." A boy near the window whispered, "That is not how we did it." Kayla's face tightened. Her marker lowered slightly. Malik recognized the movement. He remembered standing in almost the same place, feeling 23 students watching him while one word changed how the room saw him. Caroline looked at the worksheet, then at Kayla's unfinished work. For several seconds, she said nothing. The old instinct was still there. Malik could see it in the way her fingers touched the edge of the teacher's guide on her desk. Then Caroline pushed the guide away. She walked toward the board but stopped several feet from Kayla. "Show me how you saw it," she said. Kayla looked surprised. "Even if it is wrong?" Caroline nodded. "Especially if it might be." The girl turned back to the board. She explained slowly at first, tracing the numbers with the marker. A few students began asking questions. One suggested a different grouping. Another noticed that Kayla's method worked in the first example, but might fail in the second. Caroline did not rescue them with the official answer. She let them test it. Malik watched the room become something he had once needed and never known how to ask for. Dr. Brooks leaned toward him. "You all right?" Malik nodded. "Yeah." Caroline heard him and glanced toward the back row. Their eyes met. There was no apology in her expression now. That had already been given. What remained was something quieter. Proof. She turned back to Kayla. "Try the second case." Malik lowered his eyes to the notebook. On the newest page, the bridge symbol sat between 2 expressions Brooks had given him that morning. Beneath it, Malik had written a question instead of an answer. What changes if the relationship moves? He smiled slightly and picked up his pencil. Outside, the final bell rang through the hallway. No one in the classroom stood immediately. Kayla was still explaining. Caroline was still listening. Malik was still thinking. The whiteboard was full of crossed-out numbers, arrows, mistakes, and possibilities, and for the first time, none of it looked like failure. A different mind was not an empty one.